Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Peaceful Solution Character Education Correspondence course, or certification course. It's corresponding also. Everyone can be seated. It's here in the auditorium. Welcome for all of you that are watching online. If someone could turn the monitor on that's in front of me, that would be very helpful. But I'd like to welcome you all once again. We're going to continue here in the responsibility unit. We're going to be picking up on page 31. We read through page 32, but we're going to rehearse a little bit. Talk a little bit more about what it boils down to and what we've covered so far and everything. We're putting these things together, and you'll find the responsibility unit, as we talked about before, it's the fifth of 5 in a series of 5. It's the 5th unit, and that actually helps us put together the character, the acceptance, the self-control, and the respect unit, putting it all together into this responsibility unit. So a lot of things that you see in the responsibility unit is what we refer to as like echo teachings. It actually helps us and it reminds us and it gives a little bit more information, a little bit newer information, tying the other things that we've already brought out together. And tonight we're going to go back and look at some of those things that we've brought out. You could spend hours putting notes in your books and cross-referencing things. But of course, what we're wanting to do is just bring reminders to the teachers. And then as the teachers bring these reminders to the students, that way they tie these things together. And before I get too far into this, once again, I want to encourage everyone that's watching, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email us your questions at info@peacefulsolution.org, info@peacefulsolution.org, or you can also just send your questions through the official Peaceful Solution that you're watching on Facebook. Either way is fine, but if you have any questions, you can also call our 1-888 number, and you can leave there. There's always an answer machine. If there's not someone answering, there is an answer machine you can leave your message or your question on, and it's 1-888-613-9494. And I encourage you, if you have any questions, you want to know how you can get involved in your area, even if you're wanting to know, we recently had someone call and ask about a certain language that we haven't started yet in translating our books. But even if you're wanting that or needing that, let us know, because that gives us direction and where we need to work toward and getting some more things done. And we're trying to do these things as fast as we can, but we want it to be quality. And we have some of the best translators in the world, if not the best translators in the world, that are able to go through this program and get it to you the way it needs to be done, because they've been through it themselves. And that makes a huge difference when translating this program. But here on page 31, of course, this was procedure 5 that we were in, and we're not going to go back and read procedure 5 because we completed it. But I want to remind you of some things here at the very top, and it says, here's what it boils down to. And just keep that in mind. Here's what it boils down to. And then let's go to the procedures, because here we have a situation which is rare, but we're going to have a page we're going to use that's only found in the teacher's part of the book. The students don't have this. Only the teachers will have this, so it's part of the lesson plan. And when you look over to, procedure 5, we finished procedure 4. So we're in procedure 5, and it's an activity. So this is something that you're going to do as a teacher with your class, and it says, one at a time, read the negative thoughts found on page F. Now, right now, we're on LP, Lesson Plan 2, page D, and in Procedure 5. And once again, it's a gray tab page, and they're only found in the teacher's manuals. That's why it's extremely important to make sure when you buy a book or you get a book to please get a teacher's manual. That's very important if you're going to be teaching the program. But continuing, once again, it says, one at a time, read the negative thoughts found on page F. So page F, since it's a letter, you know that's part of the lesson plan for the teacher. And it says, of the lesson plan in the teacher's manual. Call on students to identify the thoughts as positive or negative. So you're going to read something, and then you're going to call on them and have them to expound on whether it is a positive thought or a negative thought. If the students identify the thought as negative, have him or her talk about what consequences could result from acting upon that thought. He is or she is then to replace the negative thought with a positive one. And in doing that, you're actually causing them to put the STOP acronym into effect. Because remember, that's what the acronym of the STOP is all about, is stopping everything that we're doing so we can start gathering our thoughts, get these emotions under control, but so we can start gathering our thoughts, thinking about our options, considering them, and then proceeding with the right choice. And that's what we're going to cause in this activity. So continuing on, he or she is then to replace the negative thoughts with a positive one. This is an excellent way for students to learn how to control their thoughts. So do as many as time permits. So once again, there's actually, if you turn over to page F, and we can put up our first slide because that's what it's going to be for those of you. And I know that's really small on your monitor. So if you have a teacher's manual, it's found on page F. It's actually the last page of your teacher's lesson plan. And it's called Identifying Thoughts. And once again, this is the activity. And it says, read each thought and have students identify if the thought is positive or negative. If negative, ask students, what would be the consequences of thinking in that particular way? Ask students for examples of positive thoughts that can replace the negative thoughts. And of course, we've got some possible answers provided for the teacher. And that's one thing the Peaceful Solution always does. Anytime there's something the teacher is asked to engage with the students with, there's always something that's put there by the Peaceful Solution to even call the teacher's mind back. And it's very helpful, especially as a teacher. It's very helpful that these things are already put there for you. This program was designed and really put together for to be such a great assistant for any teacher that wanted to teach the program. It makes it so where all you have to do is just follow along. Of course, it helps to have all of your notes, but everything is put into place for us where we really just have to follow the lesson plan and everything is truly there for us. But here you see 4 categories: thoughts, positive, negative, consequences, rewards, or replacement thoughts. And the very first one you see here at the very top, it says, he, she is so stupid. So you would ask your class, is that a positive thought or a negative thought? Well, once again, I think everybody could agree that's negative. And the consequence would be you can begin to devalue that person. You can begin to feel like he or she has nothing to contribute. You might tell others your opinion about that person and cause someone else to feel the same way. So you're actually swaying somebody's thoughts with your own. And of course, what are some replacement thoughts? Well, just because he or she does not know something does not mean he or she is stupid. You know, there's a lot of things that, you learn, and this has become huge on social media, and it's things you didn't know. You know, like on aluminum soda cans where you turn the tab around and it's a straw holder. You know, I used to fight with certain coffee creamers. I would buy them. And that was, to me, that was the most difficult thing in the world, was trying to get that aluminum foil off the top of a coffee creamer that they put on there. I don't know what they put it on with, but it holds really well. And I think I used that coffee creamer for almost probably 6 years before one of my children came in, screwed off the lid, opened it up, and hit it down. I was like, what are you doing? I was like, oh, well, there's a thing inside that cuts through the aluminum foil. That's why they have it there. I had no clue. Now, where they learned it, I didn't want to ask because I felt completely ignorant myself. I thought, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. That's what that's for. And I thought, man, every day I take a fork trying to pry those things loose and all those things. But there's many things that we will learn as we continue on through life. You know, one of the most valuable things I learned, and this is something that's been around for years. And this is just to tell you how something can be around. And this is thousands of years. And I didn't know it until probably 20, 25 years ago, was the benefits of honey and using honey as a Band-Aid. Using honey in a cut and how it's antibacterial, it has microbes and certain enzymes in it that actually helps the body repair itself. And, you know, when I first heard that, I thought, that's interesting. And then when you read about it, this has been used for thousands of years. It's just you find somebody that knows something that works and they've seen it work. They've used it themselves. Then I tried using it and I found, yeah, that's the best thing you can ever put on the cut. For me, that's what I've used, and I keep it in my first aid cabinet. That's one of the first things I use. If I get a cut, I use that. And it's amazing the things that you learn. Doesn't mean you're stupid if you didn't know. It just means no one ever taught you or taught us. And that's what we're talking about here with character education. Doesn't mean someone's stupid if they don't know something. They just might not have ever been taught. And that's the important part to know, is that we just need to take the time to teach others. So with that, he or she is so stupid, it's best to also have a conversation. Give an example. We can all feel stupid. Every one of us can feel stupid. I remember the first time I went to use Apple Pay on my phone. I didn't have a clue how to use it, and I didn't want to ask anybody because everybody else seemed like they knew what they were doing. And I'm like, I don't want to make it like I'm the dumbest person that's in this store right now. And finally I broke down and had to ask. I'm like, I can't figure it out. I almost wanted to watch a YouTube video so I didn't have to ask. And after I asked, it was pretty easy. Someone showed me how to do it, and it became really easy. But before, you kind of see even youngsters go around doing this stuff, and it's got to be simple, but you can't figure out how the simple is. Well, when we take the time to ask and we let people teach us, that really goes a long way. The next one here, of course, it starts out by saying, I hate myself. I'm always doing something stupid. Now, of course, ask your classroom, is that a positive or negative thought? They should identify that as negative. And this is some of the consequences that could take place, is you begin to form a low opinion of yourself. You can begin to not care about yourself, and that's something, as soon as we read that, that should immediately trigger our minds back to the second chapter of the respect unit, having respect for yourself. And remember, learning to respect yourself is the very first step in respecting anyone else. And you should hear these things echo through your students. Well, I remember we read. And if you don't hear that, take them back to it. And we'll go back to the respect unit a little bit tonight just to rehearse some things out of it. But that's later on in the lesson plan. But you see here, the replacement thoughts could be, I can learn from my mistakes and make better choices. And we haven't got there yet, so I don't want to say too much about it. But there's a huge difference. And we'll learn this in the next unit we're going to cover, which will be the building moral excellence. There's a huge difference between a mistake and a choice. And a lot of times we try to justify our wrongdoings by saying, oh, it was a mistake. But we'll get into that when we get there. But that's just something for you to have in your mind, and we'll remember that as we work our way towards that. But here in the next one, you see, it says, I'm glad I spoke to her. Although she's different from me, she seems like a great person. And I'm sure this is you're talking about a school atmosphere. We're not talking about meeting someone at a bar here, so that needs to be understood. We're talking about meeting someone in a classroom setting. And of course, that's a positive thought. And of course, what is the reward of that? You meet new and interesting people. Being accepted of others brings unity and peace. And of course, being accepted by others doesn't mean, I seen her selling drugs on the street corner and I thought, I should go introduce myself. So you have to use the proper context of what's being done. So when you meet this person and you put in all of those things we learned in the 4th chapter of the acceptance unit about a friend and what it means to choose a friend and all of those 4 steps, evaluating whether you want a person to be your friend. So remember all of those things when the discussion comes up. Try to put those things back into the mind of the students. When you bring something like this up, remind them, do you remember the procedures that took place to actually choose a friend? Do you remember what you look for? Do you remember they're based on character and not just on personality? And try to keep these conversations going about everything that's been learned so far. But when teaching this, you would never want to go any further than chapter 2 of the responsibility unit. In other words, what's in chapter 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 is not up for discussion yet. But you have from chapter 2 all the way back to the character unit, chapter 1, to have discussion, which is an enormous amount of information. And we'll build as we move forward. And the next one says, after school, I'm going to get even. Well, of course, you could imagine what could take place there, and you could have those thoughts in your mind. We've even had a lot of scenarios. We just had one where William used and read from the book about someone stepping on someone else's shoes. Well, of course, that's a negative thought because we remember what the author, he made reference to his father saying, never get even or fight back. 2 wrongs don't make a right. And no matter how hard you think about it, and you should take the time to do this, try to see how you can get a right out of 2 wrongs. That's like trying to get a positive out of 2 negatives. That's like trying to get white paint out of 2 cans of black paint. It will just not take place. It's impossible to do. Now, the only way you can make that work is if you lower your morals down and you don't use those standard of morality and you start excusing things to where, it was wrong, but we'll let it slide. Now it's acceptable now. So you're going to call something that's actually negative, you'll start looking at it as a positive. But here, after this, I'm going to get even. Notice the consequences. You could become violent and aggressive. Someone could be physically injured. And in today's society and today's standards that's held in schools, someone could be killed very easily. And of course, replacement thoughts could be, I will make an appointment to discuss this with our school counselor. Retaliation against people is a negative character trait. And it will always be a negative character trait because retaliation, remember, we talked about it last week. It's been mentioned many times. It's in chapter 5 of the respect unit about throwing fuel on a fire. Responding to disrespect with more disrespect is just like throwing fuel onto a fire. There's no possible way you can de-escalate that. We're causing it to become bigger, more intense, more dangerous. And that's something we have to refrain from. The next one says, I'm glad he fell. He deserves it. Of course, that's a negative thought. And consequences could be, by wanting someone to be hurt or injured, you show a lack of compassion. And really, that's the topic we're going to be getting into tonight is compassion and going back and re-looking at some things. But remember, compassion is a positive character trait. And we're going to talk about tonight how it is required to have a positive character. If you're not compassionate, you cannot have a positive character. Compassion, I remember the author of The Peaceful Solution reminding myself and William and Katan when we were teaching groups of young men that compassion was something that was must. It was a must in everyone's character. If you don't have care and concern for others and truly, truly try to put everyone else before yourself, and that I'm talking about from a teaching standard. In other words, if you're doing a class, make sure you go above and beyond to study what you're bringing. Don't just walk into a class and, well, all the answers are here. I'll just read them off as I go. Your students will only get out of the class what you put into the class. And as teachers, we really want to make sure that we can remind them of what we've covered, the benefits that can help. And of course, you bring in different news articles, you bring in different things, ideology, as far as what the world is doing to show how the peaceful solution is working and can work, how it can fix things. And I hope everyone looked it up. I looked it up. They didn't really have clear answers yet, but we mentioned about all of the last class we had on New Year's Eve, and we talked about, people should be careful. Don't go out because it is one of the deadliest days of the year. In the last article I seen one that said there were 400 plus deaths on the road, but I seen another one that said that was just under 2,900 in the United States totally. So that's in one night. And they were all alcohol related, the ones I were looking at. So you think about that, and of course people go out to party and they go out to do some wild things. Try to tie those things in too and bring those news articles or bring other things into your class, because you can go through a lot of negative thoughts examples just with that and some positive ideology also. But here at the very last one on the slides, it says, I can't believe the teacher picked her over me. Well, of course, that's a negative thought, and it says you could begin to feel resentful, hostile, and jealous. This could lead to spreading rumors about the person or treating her disrespectfully. And remember, this jealousy is a primary emotion, which leads to anger. And when anger is left uncontrolled, it leads to rage. And you want to remind your students of this. What could this lead to? If not controlled, what could it cause? And of course, the replacement thoughts could be, she deserves it. She works very hard. Maybe next time I will get picked, so what if I was not picked this time? Because there's always a next time. There's always a next time to get things through and to get things done. And I remember being in school, playing sports, and, since we were playing sports, a lot of my friends were playing sports, so we were always the ones that were captains of teams or picking teams and doing things like that. And I remember not being picked first one time, and it just mentally destroyed me. And that was in like the 6th grade. I thought my world had come to an end. And when you think back on it, it's like you see the stupidity later on. Hindsight is 20/20 is something that can be used throughout your life. But there's little things that you ever heard talk about making a mountain out of a molehill. There's a lot of situations that when you get older, it's called drama. You take something that could have been fixed in 3 seconds or less, but we want to dramatize it and what if it to death. And what could have been fixed in, 5 minutes, well, we'll spend 3.5 days, 4 or 5 days just, what if this and what if that? Well, what if an asteroid came from the sky and just destroyed it all? What if? You can just take it so far. But the peaceful solution says, what if we just examine the situation, find out what are the rules that govern the situation, and just comply with the rules. And whatever those rules are, just comply with them. And that's what we all need to agree upon. And that's something that works. Try that in your classroom. We have different techniques called the spoon technique that we'll get into in the parenting manual, where you can have discussions in a family setting. You can do it in a classroom too. You could even do it in a work environment. I just don't know how many people in a work environment would, want to. Usually holding the spoon in a work environment is not going to help. People are just going to talk over people. But when you think about these things, there are ways to solve problems. And of course, we have to bring our thoughts into subjection. Well, looking here, go back to LP 2D, and that's, of course, finishing the activity, but have discussion with it. Engage your students, and please, remember, go back and remind them what you've learned so far. Always remember the second, third chapter of the self-control unit is talking about identifying our emotions and how to deal with those emotions and dealing with anger and anger triggers and learning what a primary emotion is and a secondary emotion is. Most people don't even know these things until they start getting involved in researching and reading, and then they start noticing it in themselves, and they start realizing, you're right, this is the way it works. Well, we went through that too. We didn't know it until we got involved, and we were some of those people going, yeah, you're right, this makes sense. Until I read this, I didn't know. And when you read it and you put it into action, you start realizing, yep, this is exactly how it works. But everyone can control their thoughts. Everyone can, but you have to work at it, and it comes through education. That's how it comes through. It doesn't come through, sitting out on a sunny day and, and I'm not trying to make fun of anybody who would do that. There's nothing wrong with relieving your mind, getting the stress out. But if that's the only thing you're going to do and no education, when you get done with your relaxation in the sun, guess what's there? Your problem is still there. It doesn't go away. So when you think about it, we have to deal with every problem that arises. We can put them off, put them on a bookshelf, but it's still there. You can throw some dirt on it, but it's still there. You can put a Band-Aid on it, but it's still there. And I've got a friend that could fix any car without the part. He can make it run. And he'll tell you, now, you'll be back next week, but it'll get you through this week. But he's very honest. I got it where it'll run, but it ain't going to run very long, but it'll run. For some people, it's like, okay, well, that'll get me to next week. For me, I would want to burn the car. It would be like, I don't want to keep breaking down. It's just too frustrating because for me, it breaks down when I'm out in the middle of nowhere. That's the way it's always worked for me. For me, it was motorhomes that did that, though. But here in Procedure 6, tell students that controlling their thoughts can also help them to become compassionate towards others. Explain that demonstrating compassion towards others is a responsibility that we all share. So all, that means everyone. Todos, as they say down south. Everyone, everybody. It doesn't exclude anything or anyone. When we as a society lack compassion for others, the result can be hatred, crime, and violence. Have students take turns reading the section, Compassion is the Art of Caring, found on page 33 through 34. Allow time for them to do the exercise on page 34. Discuss their answers as a class. Stress the importance of using self-control to become aware of thoughts that could lead to cold and uncaring attitudes about others. So looking back over here to page 33, and before we get to that, notice the word compassion, the art of caring there on the top of page 33. That's where our procedure told us to start, but we're going to, just for the sake of getting some things back into our mind about what we covered so far, we're going to reread some things from some units we've had about compassion and how to deal with things and how to move forward with these thoughts. And if we could put up the next slide, because here on page 31, we've seen what it said, where here's what it boils down to. And if you remember the self-control unit, there on page 180, we also had a what it boils down to moment. And of course, it said, for society to demonstrate self-control, every individual must. And every time you see that word must, underline it, highlight it, circle it. You know, if you could put flashing arrows on it, do it that way, because that means it's something that has to be done. There's no way to get around it if you want a positive result. When you see the word must, there's nothing you can do to get around it if you want a positive result. Notice it says, be committed to valuing the safety and well-being of others, respect the possessions of others, and work for the things they want to own. Be willing to stop and think about the consequences of their actions and how their choices affect others. And once again, we're talking about choices, and compassion is a choice. To be compassionate to someone is a choice. And of course, that choice is ours. And it's very important that we remember that we cannot blame anyone else for the choices we make. It is literally our choice to make, either to make the right choice or to make the wrong choice. It's ours to make. And if we can go to the next slide, this is found on page 111 of the self-control unit, and it was entitled, The Choice is Yours. And if you remember, we read here on page 31 in the second paragraph, it says, once you have dealt with anger in the right way, let it go. And of course, you see it's very bold there and in the lettering itself, because it's something important. Once we've dealt with it, let it go. But that wasn't the first time we heard that. In the self-control unit on page 111, we started out by saying it takes courage and strength of character to practice self-control when you are being deliberately provoked. You must set your mind in advance to use positive communication and respond peacefully even when you are being antagonized. Once you have responded appropriately and found a peaceful solution, give yourself credit for having made the right choice to avoid a crisis situation, and then notice, let it go. And we have it highlighted there, and I know it depends on the monitor you're looking at how well you can see that, but it says to let it go. And why? Notice here in the second paragraph, and once again, this is on page 111 of the self-control unit, so you can write down for a reference. It says, don't replay the incident over and over in your mind. If the person who antagonized you caused you to feel embarrassed or afraid, then deal honestly with these emotions by talking about them with a friend or trusted adult. If you hold on to these emotions, you could begin to have negative thoughts about yourself and about the person you had the conflict with. This will cause you to feel frustrated and resentful. If you are not careful to guard your mind and you focus on the negative incident, you could seek to get revenge. And that's exactly what we're talking about right now and what we've been talking about. We have to be responsible enough not to let these things take hold of us. Then here in the third paragraph, it says, holding on to the emotional pain of anger or frustration will cause you trouble in the long run. You could end up exploding at others in rage when you reach your breaking point, or you could direct the rage at yourself and suffer from stress-induced headaches, stomach aches, and other health problems. You could end up trying to hurt yourself, or worst of all, commit suicide. Don't let this occur to you. Always choose to respond peacefully in a crisis situation. Do not allow the incident to negatively affect your life, and do not retaliate. This only keeps the problem going, or only adds fuel to the fire. So think about that with all those things in mind. Turning back over to page 33. Page 33, and we have here compassion, the art of caring. And of course, compassion is a positive character trait, and compassion is something that's required of us to be able to become teachers even of the peaceful solution. And it's something that you're continually learning. You know, I think all teachers that teach this program will tell you you're never, ever close to finished learning. You never reach that, because there's always, every day brings a different challenge, and you can learn from every day how this should have been applied to help prevent situations. And of course, it's something that we work, all of us, I know here that are in this auditorium, and I know many people that are watching online, work very hard to implement this program into their life because it's proven to make an effect and to make a change and to bring peace to situations. But when we live in a society where you look out in, as William had mentioned, and it's probably the most popular two news stories in the news when you look out, is Ukraine and Russia and Gaza. And you see there's no compassion in either place. People are hiding, and how much can you hide? If you hide in a tunnel, there's people over right now in the Gaza Strip, they're pumping seawater down into the tunnels to flood people out, to drown them. So there's really no place to hide. You can run and look for your place of safety, but you won't find any. Well, we have bunker buster bombs, we have nuclear bombs, we have white phosphorus bombs. There's all kinds of things that can be used. We have mastered the art of not caring in society. And next year we're going to spend, or this year, since we're already 3 days into this, we're going to spend $886 billion more on not caring. And people can say all they want to. If you didn't have this, you would not be able to protect this country. I would think that if we would quit poking the ribs of other people, we probably wouldn't be provoking people to anger, as we just talked about. No one makes you angry, but boy, you can share. How many times can you go into somebody's country and steal their assets before we're sick of this. You're not doing it anymore. Well, and really think about this. Who pays the consequences for the decisions of a few? Look at Gaza, look at Ukraine. Look at what's getting ready to take place between Guyana and Venezuela, two countries that have extreme poverty. Guyana just now fell into oil. They're not going to give it up because now they have access to lots of money. The people are going to actually start being able to start, as they say, living more American. That's what everybody says. And of course, Venezuela, they're like, well, we want that oil. We got all this oil over here, but we want that oil. Well, the reason they want that oil, because Venezuelan oil is hard to refine. It's what they call dirty oil. But the oil that's been found off the coast there of Guyana and Venezuela, right there at Essequibo, it's clear, light, sweet crude, just like Saudi Arabia produces, which means it can be produced for $20 a barrel. Well, that's what everybody wants. So you're going to see all countries going there because that's worth fighting for right there. The people were starving to death. Nah, that's not worth it. And think about this. When you see, I would encourage everyone to read some history. Read some history about Venezuela. Get to know it because we're talking about compassion right now. Watch and get to know what that country's been through because America, we could go through it ourselves. When you go from the third largest economy in the world to the third poorest economy, the third worst economy in the world in just 40 years. But yet you have enormous wealth in your oil, but you can't get it on the market. You can't sell it. So you need a financial system that will let you sell it. Well, is that compassion or is it retaliation? That's what you have to figure out. Is that new financial system, is that something that they're having compassion on me, or are they using that to retaliate against this other financial system? Because this is the world we live in. Well, with that in mind, go to the next slide, and this is before we get too far into page 33, and it's called What is Negative Character? This was on page 19 of the character unit. And notice here it says negative character traits define who you are just as clearly as positive traits. They, too, are a combination of values, environment, and experiences. However, unlike positive character traits, negative character traits can lead to behaviors that could cause hatred, violence, and even wars. Hatred, violence, and even wars. If you treat someone dishonestly, or notice, or show a lack of compassion, extremely important to see this. A lack of compassion will lead to wars. You are saying that you do not care about that person or about that country or about that part of society. If that person also has a negative character and responds to you in disrespect or aggression or an aggressive way, then you have what is known as a conflict. And we have conflicts taking place all around the world today. And we have proven this year we're spending $886 billion. Last year we spent $840-something billion. So that's $1.6 trillion in 2 years, and the only thing we've done is manage to create bigger wars. Well, a conflict that exists without a peaceful solution will result in hatred and violence. Here's another example. Let's say someone dishonest steals money from someone who is unforgiving, or steals their oil, or steals anything that they're using for their own country. The person who was stolen from will try to retaliate against the one who stole from him. This too can result in hatred and violence. So we'll stop right there, because then it gives some examples that we went through in the character unit. But going on to the next slide, this was on page 29. It was a definition of compassion that we found there in the character unit. And it says compassionate, to care about the needs of others. And that means to truly have concern for someone, not just everybody needs clean water. Well, don't just say it, do something. Do something to cause it to come to pass. You know, there's this big saying in the society, be the change you want to see. Well, that takes a lot of effort. But notice it says if you see someone feels down or sad, you care enough to try to help. For example, your friend lost her wallet, you forego your plans and help her look for it. That's just one way that we can deal with this. And then going on to the next slide, this was a slide that we've referenced a lot. And of course, it's found on page 80 of the character unit, and it's called Setting Your Mind in Advance. And that's what education really is for. And we've talked about how we're setting our mind in advance and preparing for curveballs and pitfalls. Well, education is how we set our mind in advance, making ourselves aware of how these problems can come up in our lives and how we can properly process them. But continuing here on page 80 of the character unit, it says, have you ever heard the saying, it's all in your head? Most people say it sarcastically, but there's some truth to it. Whether you are aware of it or not, every action begins with a thought. Setting your mind in advance to maintain your positive character traits by first considering just how important it is to have a moral character. To be trusted, admired, respected, and known as an honest, reliable, compassionate person is something you should want. And if someone realizes when they deal with you in a situation that you're someone that's compassionate, people are going to be more willing to work with you. They're going to be more willing to want to do things with you, and they're going to be more trusting of your input or things that you say. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that everybody has reached this to where, just listen to what I say because I'm compassionate. You know, it's, I know there's, I see a lot on social media as it references some movie. I don't even know what movie it is, honestly. But it's a really tall person that's supposed to be representing some kind of Babylonian ideology, and they're supposed to be some kind of ruler, and they're 8 foot tall. And he's coming down on a Roman soldier or a Spartan or something. It's something dressed up like that. And he tells him what he wants to do, and he says, because I am kind. But he's slaughtering people like crazy. And he's saying, I'll let you live because I am kind. And I think, man, that is the most messed up way of trying to describe something. You know, I've killed everybody else, but I will let you live if you do everything I say because I'm kind. Well, if someone does everything that you want them to do, I would say that that person is being submissive. You know, they're actually following instructions. Now, I don't know what the instructions were, any of those things, but, you know, obviously if somebody is slaughtering somebody and they let you live because they are kind and they continue to slaughter people, no, they're not kind. They're not kind. They're not compassionate. They're murderers. You know, it's a very negative thing. But looking here at the next slide, and once again, we want to get these things into our mind before we get into the art of caring about compassion. It says, and this is on page 156 of the self-control unit, it says a lack of self-control affects our society. And remember what society is. We read that in chapter 5 last class, talked about the ripple effect in the character unit. It's a group of people that are governed by a common body of rules or laws. And that's universal rules. Don't steal things. Nobody wants to be stolen from. You know, we talk about respect, how it must be given. You don't earn those things. Well, picking up here on page 156 of the self-control unit, it says, now that you have a better understanding of what a society is, very important to understand what it is and understand how it operates, let's explore how a lack of self-control affects our society. One of the ways of determining if people within a society are practicing self-control is to examine the rate of crime. Or if you want to know on a global scale, examine the rate of war. Crime is defined as a grave or serious violation of law or offense against morality. If you don't have that underline it really big. Because when you just think about what we just said, and you can think about, you read about the gun violence in Chicago, you read about all the fentanyl that's coming across the southern border, and they're blaming China for the chemical, and of course the cartels that are creating it, and it gets into American hands, and Americans are dying. And they talk about how this is such a crime against society. But let me read one more time what crime is defined as again, as it says here in the self-control unit. Crime is defined as a grave or serious violation of law or offense against morality. And then define the rules of war. If you've never read the definition by the Geneva Convention that gives you the rules of war, you should spend time reading them. It's a lot of them. And I'll give you an example of one, because we're talking about on a global scale. After World War II, the Geneva Convention decided in World War II they were using bayonets that had three-sided knives. So they looked like pyramids. They would go down and then had a flat bottom. So during the Geneva Convention, when they were deciding some rules for war, one of the things they were decided was you can't use those knives anymore. You have to use a straight edge knife because it's too hard to fix the puncture wound of a three-edged knife. So therefore, if you're going to stab somebody, stab them with a flat knife. You would think somebody would have threw up their hand in that convention and said, why are we stabbing people? Stabbing someone in itself is a negative thing. That's going to hurt somebody. You could kill somebody stabbing somebody. Obviously, if you're stabbing somebody, you're not doing it to help them. You're trying to kill them. But we're going to make a rule that if someone stabs you, they're going to have to kill you with a flat edge knife. They can't do it with a three-edge knife. See how great that is? Now, that's the wisdom of society. And I'm not trying to bash any, I'm not trying to speak against, and I don't know who the person was that actually brought that rule forth, but it's complete insanity to think that harming somebody, it's almost like where you say if you shoot somebody, you've got to shoot them at least with a 9mm, 380, that's just not gonna do it. Or 22, that's even worse. You need to shoot them with something that's got power. That way you can take them out. Well, why don't you evaluate why not to shoot somebody? And I only say that because I was speaking to a policeman the other day. The guy was really knowledgeable about certain things. The guy has a lot of knowledge. I enjoyed my conversation with him. And he was explaining to me why on certain police forces they use certain guns. Because this one will take a person down. The other one, gives you a little bit of kick, but won't get the job done. And I'm thinking, wow. And I understand what he was saying with it, and I'm not condemning, I'm not speaking against what the police officers do, but it's the ideology, because they deal with a lot of people that are mentally ill. They deal with a lot of people that are out of control, a lot of uneducated people. And moving on here, when you think about that, it says crimes, back to page 156, crimes such as burglary, rape, school shootings, road rage, and other unsafe driving practices are examples of ways in which people demonstrate a lack of self-control. Where there is a lack of self-control, there is also a lack of moral responsibility and compassion for others. Remember, moral responsibility is us choosing. Remember, it's our choice. We just read about that. It's our choice to follow these rules. So moral responsibility is the being responsible enough to choose to follow the rules, because morals are rules and they keep us safe. When we ignore the rules or we're irresponsible and we don't apply the rules, we're going to bring harm. That has no compassion involved in it, and it has nothing but disrespect that comes from it. It's extremely important that we adhere to the things that bring a society together, which is a common body of rules, as we read. If we live in a lawless society, that's where we have an immoral society. You can't say, well, I don't like that law, so we'll just do away with that one. It seems like, and I don't know, I really meant to look at this and I didn't. Every new year, there's a bunch of laws that come into effect. January 1st. In the state of Texas, there's always some that are really hilarious. And I didn't really look to see, but it'd be interesting. Catan might do that. He's the person that showed it to me years ago and got me looking at that. And he's going to be speaking next class, so he might do that. Because there's some really interesting rules or laws that are put into the books, and you really wonder, why in the world, a llama can't cross the road between 3 and 5 or something like that. Okay. Not sure why we do that, but I hope somebody tells the llama. But here on the next slide, and this is the last slide we want to go through, and all of these things are just to recall our minds back, echoing what we went through so far. Chapter 1, the value of respect. This was out of the respect unit, found on page 3. This was the introductory to the unit. And remember, it said, have you ever heard the saying, you must stand for what is right or you will fall for anything? What it means is that you have to know what is the proper way to conduct yourself so that you are not influenced to do something that is morally wrong. And remember, that's breaking the rules. This takes different traits such as honesty, compassion, responsibility, and respect. Developing these traits will enable you to stand for what is right and treat others with care and concern. So the care and concern and the consideration, that's respect. And of course, compassion, as we said here, is the art of caring. So to be respectful, we have to have compassion because that's really what brings it together. So looking here to page 33 of our responsibility unit, remembering some of the things. And once again, if you don't have our PDF books where you can search these books, if you were to type in the word compassion in the first 4 books, you get over 300 different hits. You would be like, I had to bring a new responsibility unit because my other responsibility unit has so much stuff in it. I don't know if you've ever seen where someone overkills putting notes in their books, but you can't even tell where your notes, what goes where anymore. It's just too much. It looked like a great idea to begin with, and then it became a bad idea because I don't know where the lines go anymore. I got so many going. But you can get all of these things where you can put your references in there. And I say that because all of you are studying to be teachers. And if you don't have those, you need to get with us so you can have access to them. You can have them on your smartphone. I can literally pull up a responsibility unit on my smartphone, and I can search the responsibility unit for any topic I want to, or respect, or self-control, or acceptance, or any of the books that we have. And it really helps when you're a teacher and you're trying to put things together. A lot of the stuff you'll just remember. A lot of the stuff we brought tonight, we've taught it so much, you just remember where it's at. But sometimes you're just really wanting to find that one thing and you can't remember, well, it's one of the 5 books, and it really helps a lot. So if you don't have access to that, let us know, get with us, and we'll make sure to get you access. They're files that you cannot alter. Yeah, and I see people already messaging me right now wanting the files. Yeah, that's fast, and people like fast around here. I'll give it that. But these are things that are helpful. It's a tool that should be welcome to everyone. But they're locked files, so they can't be edited, but you can search them. So continuing on here, it says, compassion is to care for others and to have a desire to relieve their suffering. That's something we all have to develop in the Peaceful Solution. This also involves controlling how you think. If you see someone in need, think about how you would want to be treated if you were in a similar situation. With this right here, make sure to remind yourself all the way back to the beginning of this book of page 1. And remember the note to the student. Have you ever heard the saying, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish and you will feed him for a lifetime? So think about that. Giving somebody $5 and buying them a meal or whatever it costs, $10 or $15 these days, that doesn't help somebody except for that instant. The Peaceful Solution is not about helping somebody for that instant. It's about fixing situations for a lifetime. Now, it will start helping when we offer things, but if someone was to ask, and I've had this in other countries even, people ask, hey, can you help me? I give them a book. And I've had people look at me, what am I supposed to do with that? Read it. Once you read it, you'll know. Now whether they read them or not, I don't know. I very seriously doubt everyone does. But like I tell them, if you're not going to read it, give it to someone else. Eventually that book will find someone that will read it. And that's what we do, because that's really, peace can only come through education. But continuing on, once again, if you see someone in need, think about what you would want. Think about how you would want to be treated if you were in a similar situation. A note of caution: having compassion for others does not mean putting yourself in danger to assist every stranger you meet. The truth is, people can be cruel and do take advantage of others. So always consider your safety first. Then keep your eyes open for opportunities where you can safely assist someone. For example, returning lost items to their owners or to the lost and found department is not only honesty, but it's also compassionate. There's a lot of people in society that will take things that belong to others. They look for things that are lost, or things that somebody is not, the owner is not there to identify it. But continuing on, it says, how would you feel if you lost your belongings? If you lost one of your belongings, would you want someone to return it to you? I know people that have lost their belongings, and they know where it's at and who has it, and those people still will not return them. That's called stealing. But in society, there's a legal process you have to go through, and about $50,000, it seems like, to prove that, hey, that's mine. I got a piece of paper right here. So I had to pay $50,000 to get back something that was $30,000. These rules should be more effective than what they are. And that's just situations that occur all around society. And it becomes to the point to where, well, it's going to cost me this much to get my stuff back. This is what it's worth. I'll just give it up and lose it. That's where society fails, and you see that taking place all the time in society. Continuing on here, it says, another way you can show compassion is by never intentionally causing harm to someone else. Notice intentionally. Pranks like pulling a chair from under someone as he or she is about to sit down, as well as purposely tripping someone and causing him or her to fall, are unkind and cruel. They show a lack of compassion and are irresponsible acts that could lead or that could result in someone getting seriously hurt. So once again, think about these things. And, that's the old thing they do in the school where someone goes to sit down, you pull the chair out, person falls straight down on their backside, and everybody laughs. But you never think about, if you're the one doing that, the harm that could bring upon someone else until someone gets seriously hurt. And then that's when reality sets in. I remember, these are things that stick in your mind. I remember being in the 7th grade, and whenever you caught the bus and you got to the school, the bus ran 2 routes. If you were on the first route, they took you straight to the gymnasium. And that's where you sat, and you waited for, the basically homeroom to open up, and everybody went to homeroom. But you would get there like at 7:30. There was one teacher in the gymnasium with hundreds of students. So you can only imagine the chaos, the goofidity taking place, people goofing around. And I remember one young man come up to a girl that was known as one of the best athletes in the school. And he was joking with her, and he went to pull her shoe off, and he tried to jerk her shoe off because he was going to try to throw it in the rafters. And I remember sitting and watching it, and I would have never thought how bad it would have gotten. But when he jerked her foot, she came off the bleacher, her leg hit the floor in a really odd way, and all the way up to the 12th grade, that girl was still going through knee replacement surgeries and trying to get her knee fixed because it destroyed her knee. Then she went from someone that was very active and athletic to someone, here you got 14 years of age, 13 years of age. That's all done. She can't even walk anymore. I remember her being on crutches almost every year, it seemed like, every year all the way up through high school. All because one person wanted to play a prank and do something. And, you can say you're sorry, you can apologize, you can say I shouldn't have done it, but that doesn't fix what you do to someone else. And it was all done out of, when I think back upon it, that was, and I remember watching it, and it was like in slow motion it taking place. If, there you had 5 seconds changed a life forever. And it's really drastic how just a few seconds can alter somebody's life. And you can't give it back. You can't change it, but you're thankful. It didn't cost someone their life, but it did destroy someone's leg to the point they couldn't use it like they used to use it. But continuing on here, the last paragraph on page 33, It says you can also show compassion by being careful about how you speak to others. And that's something we can all work on. How we say things, the tone of voice that we use, and we went through that in the character unit. That's part of the skills of leadership we talked about. The way we say it, it's not about what you say, it's about how you say it. It says, for example, you should never tease or make fun of others. Rather than use your words to bring someone down, you could say something kind. You could also take the time to encourage and motivate others if they are unsure of the right choice to make. For example, if a friend confides in you that he feels pressured to experiment with drugs, you can encourage him not to do anything that would negatively affect the outcome of his life. Then encourage him to speak to his parents, guardians, teachers, or guidance counselors. Remember, having compassion is a form of interaction, and all actions begin with a thought. So very important that we look at that. Compassion is being used not as a noun to identify something, but as a verb. It's actually an action. So we know that a thought has to come first because compassion is an action. So we have to get our thoughts to where we program that into our minds so that our actions are compassionate. And of course, that starts with showing care, consideration, and concern for others. But once again, it begins with a thought. Looking over here to page 34, it says, read the beginning of the following scenario, which has two opposite endings. In the respective columns, determine what positive or negative thoughts one must have in order to arrive at each conclusion. So we see here, it says, at the mall, you see an elderly lady with several packages. Her hands are full and she is struggling to open the door and balance all of her packages at the same time. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind pulls the door from her hand. She trips and regains her balance, but some of her packages fall. So here we have two thoughts a person can have. We have positive thoughts and then negative thoughts. And of course, you see here, let's do the negative thoughts first, and then we'll fix them with the positive. It's always better to end on a positive. But it says, here's some negative thoughts. Old people are so pathetic, she or he can't even open the door. You know one thing about making fun of old people? That's everybody's goal, is to get old. Nobody wants to die young. And, this was back when you opened doors. Now the doors open for you in most stores. Here in the United States anyway. But notice here it says you totally ignore her and you go out another door, leaving her struggling to keep the door open while the rest of her packages fall. And you think about someone that's elderly, you think about how they've worked their whole life. And one thing that it's hard to understand when you're young is how much your body changes once you get old. And you think about, when you're young, you don't worry about, my knees work right, my elbows work well, everything's great, I could run 10 miles. But as we get older, the body tends not to work as well. Things start breaking down, and we have to not look forward to the breaking down of the body, but we need to have compassion on people that, they're now their body, they've spent a lot of time, 80, 90 years old. I've got one customer that comes in my store. I am always amazed at this lady. She was really great friends with the author of The Peaceful Solution. She knew him for about 40 years. This lady's 87 years old, and, we'll come in and we'll do chairs, certain types of furniture for her. And I'll ask her, you need somebody to go help you unload that? No, I'll get it. And she's throwing 50-pound feed sacks in the back of her truck to take to her horses. And this is an 87-year-old woman that's probably, 5'3" and 110 pounds. And I'm sitting there thinking, this woman could outwork most men that I know. And I asked her, I said, you sure you don't need help? I'll never need help, because the day I start doing that's the day I'll die. I'll keep working till then. And she won't let you help her either. She's as sweet as she can be, very kind lady, but she takes work seriously. And you can tell she was brought up with a very determined work ethic. And she's going to do what she needs to do. And it's amazing, because there's some people that they get offended if you try to help them, but if you push it enough, she'll let you help. But she's going to insist on doing it by herself when she gets home. And that's something that, so there's boundaries to that, but some people are pretty impressive. But here's some positive thoughts. And we're speaking about the elderly lady. You know, the gust of wind pulls the door from her hand and she trips and she regains her balance, but some of her packages fall. Some of the positive thoughts are, oh no, that lady almost fell. She looks like she's having trouble. Well, that thought should lead to an action, which means you should go help the person. Notice you could go help her by opening the door for her. You could ask if she needs help picking up the packages that fell. Or even better, you could ask if you could carry it for her to her car. You know, and these are things I remember when I was growing up young, and I don't get out to grocery stores much, so I have no idea what they do in grocery stores these days. I haven't been to a grocery store in probably 15 years. I just don't get out to grocery stores. Back when I was growing up, they would take your groceries out for you. They would not let you carry your own groceries. That was just considered bad business for a grocery store. And that was back when I grew up in North Carolina, and they could still do that. I just don't know. But back then, no, it wasn't. It didn't matter how old you were. They were going to roll them out for you, and they were going to load them in your car. That's just the way it was. And there was no questions about it. If you wanted to take it, well, that's great. You can have the want, but you're not going to do it. We're going to do it for you. But continuing on here, it says, from this exercise, it should be clear to see that your thoughts affect your actions. Having positive thoughts about others means realizing that they, like you, are worthy of respect and consideration. Having compassion for others is a responsibility that all people should have or all people should share. So once again, remember, as we read on page 33, the very last sentence, remember, having compassion is a form of interaction, and all actions begin with a thought. So it's something we have to do. The thought actually will put this into motion, and we'll either show compassion or we'll show lack of compassion. It's just like respect. We'll either be respectful or we'll be disrespectful. So keep those things in mind. We're going to stop right here on page 34. Katan will pick up the next class on page 35, and I'm sure there'll be a little bit of rehearsal, but we'll pick up on developing a positive work ethic. So our next class is going to be this coming Sunday, be January the 7th at 5:30 p.m., and we look forward to everyone joining us once again. Thank you very much.